Friends, let us continue our discussion on reactor design, and before we go to some few specific cases of different types of reactors, let us just recap what we saw in the last session, namely the mass and energy balances for tubular and stirred tank reactors when we are dealing with homogeneous system. So, starting with tubular reactor and mass balance equations, we have this mass balance equation, and if we are please note we are dealing with homogeneous system. So, this is our mass balance equation, which denotes for accumulation term, denotes for the fluxes which are both convective as well as diffusive at the rate of generation of this species. So, this is our mass balance equation for a tubular reactor. Now, if we go through energy balance, we once again have a similar energy balance. The first term here denoting the accumulation of energy, this is the convective flux or convective enthalpy flow, if you like to call it. This is the contribution due to reaction summation delta HI RI, that is, if we assume that there are n reactions I 1, 2, 3, 4 up to R reactions, let us say independent, then each of these reaction is having heat of reaction delta HI, then sum total of delta HI and RI will be the net generation of energy in the reactor, and the last term accounting for the energy that is added to the system. If for example, this is assuming that we have a tubular reactor and it is surrounded by a shell through which a cold or hot fluid at reference temperature Tr is flowing through. So, depending upon whether Tr is greater than T, that is temperature inside the reactor, we either will have adding the energy to the system or we will be removing the energy to the system. Now, this is as far as the tubular reactor is concerned. For stirred tank reactor, we can write mass and energy balances, that is what we have here is a stirred tank reactor with material flowing continuously in and out. Let us say for the JH species, these are the flow rates, temperature inside is T, let us say that temperature here is T naught, here is Te, same as T. So, once again accumulation is molar flow rate coming in, going out, plus what is getting generated, that is our mass balance for stirred tank reactor. Similar energy balance, energy accumulation, this is the convective enthalpy flow, which as you would guess at some point assuming constant Cp can also be written as T0 minus Te, a more familiar term. This is the contribution due to reaction and this is the heat addition to the system. Once again we have a jacket having a cross area of coverage AK, transfer coefficient U. So, Tr minus T, that becomes our energy balance. Now, let us move forward and see what happens to our mass and energy balances when we have multi-phase systems, and in particular we would like to look at what happens to mass and energy balances when we have gas solid catalytic reactions, let us say. Non-catalytic reactions will be also along the similar line. So, let us try to first look at how we develop the mass balances for gas solid catalytic reaction. So, we are now considering multi-phase reactors, and let us start with fixed bed reactor, and extensions for other kinds will follow in due course. So, let us say that this is my reactor. It is packed with solids between z equal to 0 to z equal to L. So, there are solids all through this reactor. The gaseous components come inside the reactor, they react in presence of this catalyst and they leave. Now, this also in some sense is a tubular reactor. Although in tubular reactor we always show it like this, nothing prevents us from showing tubular reactor in this particular manner. The orientation hardly matters. It is the kind of flow that flows inside these reactors which is of concern to us. Okay. So, in principle the mass and energy balances for fixed bed reactor, so we are looking at fixed bed reactors now, must be same as or similar to at least that of tubular reactor. Indeed they are. However, there is one difference that we have to take into account, and that is there are two phases in this reactor, one solid and other one the void or the gaseous phase, which represents the voids. Now, our gaseous reactants are moving through the voids, then they are getting diffused or they are diffusing inside the catalyst, reacting, products are coming and so on. But as far as the main flow is concerned, convective flow is concerned, it is essentially from one end of the reactor through voids of this bed through to the other end of the reactor. So, in this particular case we have to now consider or acknowledge the presence of these solids in this reactor. So, to do that, let us start defining few quantities. Let us say that epsilon b is the voidage of the bed. That means the volume that is available for gases to flow Vf to the reactor volume V. Let that be epsilon b. Then we also have to worry about the voidage in the catalyst pore, because remember the catalyst is also porous. So, let us call epsilon p as the voidage of the catalyst pellet, okay, which is Vfp, void volume of the pellet divided by the volume of the pellet. Okay. So, now let us try to write down the mass and energy balances for this particular reactor, starting with, let us say that we have a small cross section of Z and Z plus delta Z of this bed, and let us try to look at what is happening in this small cross section. So, what is this small cross section? It consists of both solids and the voids, and we will assume that void fraction is uniform through the bed. So, epsilon p, epsilon b equal are applicable in this particular case as well. So, let us try to write down the mass balance equation for the component J, which is part of this reacting stream. So, as before, we will do accumulation equal to in minus out plus generated. Okay. So, same as before. Now, let us look at accumulation term. If we say that Cj concentration at time t plus delta t and Cj at time t is the concentration at time t, then this into AF into delta Z, that is the volume. Remember, the concentration Cj is per unit fluid volume, multiplied by the fluid volume is the total moles of J which are accumulated. Now, this accumulation is result of flux of J that is coming in at Z minus flux of J at Z plus delta Z in time delta t, and flux is again in void volume per unit void area, sorry. So, that is AF into in time delta t. This is what the moles of J would come in and go out. And what about generation? Generation, typically if you recall, we denote it per unit volume of the reactor. So, let us say the volume of the reactor is A delta Z, A is the cross section area in time t, and for time being I am just going to put Qm J as the rate of generation of this species J. Now, you may wonder what is this Qmj. We will for time being leave it at Qmj, and the reason for this will become clear as we go on developing different types of models. So, right now we will just say that Qmj is the rate. So, once again if we look at my Cj, it is let us say kilomole per meter cube of the fluid, and these units are important to keep in mind, because otherwise we will not have consistency of units for all the terms in our mass balance, and we are likely to make some mistakes. Flux of J is again kilomole per let us say per hour. Again the fluid volume, both these are per fluid volume, and for the reason why we choose this will become clear. Qmj we are going to call it kilomole per reactor volume per hour, and therefore, so this is per reactor volume, and we multiplied it by reactor volume A delta Z in our mass balance equation. Okay. So, this is my mass balance equation. So, now if I divide this by A delta Z delta t and take a limit as delta Z goes to 0, delta t goes to 0, that is convert a difference equation into a differential equation, we will get, for example, the first term over here, the accumulation term will simplify to, remember we are dividing by A delta Z. So, AF by A, that is my epsilon bed, the fluid volume by the bed volume, epsilon B Cj dou T. So, that will represent my accumulation term, plus once again dou Z of epsilon B into flux of J. If I take this term on the other side and use the appropriate unit, equal to Qmj is my energy balance. Now, what is my flux of J? I can write my flux of J. Remember my flux of J, two components, U into Cj plus diffusive flux. U is my interstitial velocity. So, U is my fluid flow rate F prime divided by AF. So, I can write this U into Cj minus, if I use my diffusive flux, that gives me my fluid diffusive flux rather, and this is convective flux. So, this together gives me my total flux. So, now if we put all these things together, we get our mass balance equation. So, that mass balance equation now takes form of this particular equation, namely which we just now derived, denoting the flux, the accumulation and the generation. Note here, what we did from that particular equation to here is we multiplied epsilon b into interfacial area into Cj and denoted this by superficial velocity. Okay. So, that is where superficial velocity. So, that is where that US comes in. This is our standard diffusive flux equation, and QMJ is my mass balance. So, this is my mass balance for fixed bed reactor. I have not yet specified what this QMJ is. Now, if you recall, this equation is exactly identical to our tubular reactor mass balance equation. That is, if we go back to this equation and my fixed bed reactor is exactly identical, except what I have done now is I have said we have this epsilon b factor, because the entire bed cross section is not available for fluid to flow, only the fraction of it epsilon b is available. So, that is one change. Here, because of that, the same effect, entire fluid is not available for or the cross section is not available for flow. So, we have velocity US, and then there this term was the rate of generation, simply the kinetic rate. But remember, we have now transport phenomena within, that is internal as well as external diffusion phenomena associated with the catalyst pellet, that is responsible for telling me what the rate of reaction is. So, I have to now make suitable assumptions and put some values for that rate, but before we do that, we will just now take it that our energy balance will also be similar to that for a tubular empty reactor, with the exception that this is now heat generation rate, not necessarily the term which we had seen earlier, summation delta I HI RI summed over all reaction rate, that we will not be using over here, but otherwise this is my accumulation term, this term represents my conduction as well as convective flow energy transport, and this denotes my energy added by external surrounding fluid. So, in that sense, our mass balances are very similar to what happens for a tubular reactor. However, there are certain differences, and we will now look at what is, we have still are silent on what is this QMJ and QH. How do we define those? That is what we will now focus our attention on. Okay. Now, let us say that we have our catalyst bed, there are these catalyst particles, okay. But let us take one such particle, and if we say that the both mass and energy transport limitations are not present. So, no mass and energy transport limitations, which means what? The concentrations inside are uniform, temperatures are uniform, in which case the reaction occurs at the same rate throughout the catalyst pellet, and since we are assuming all catalyst pellet at a given cross section are identical, I can simply say my rate of mass transfer generation is nothing but the rate of reaction, right. This is equivalent to saying, actually from our earlier notation, QMJ is nothing but the observed rate, okay. And if there are no mass and energy transport limitations, this is nothing but the kinetic rate. Therefore, QMJ is my rate of reaction Rj, and QH, again taking the same analogy, is nothing but summation of delta Hi Ri. So, what have we now assumed? We have assumed that even though we have catalyst particles, the diffusional and mass and energy transport limitations are not there. As a result, we see that our mass balances with this particular kind of substitution will actually be exactly identical to, that is QMJ is Rj, this is nothing but Hi Ri, will be exactly identical to our mass and energy balances for homogeneous system. Hence, this assumption or this kind of modeling approach is referred to as pseudo homogeneous model. Homogeneous because the kinetic terms are same as homogeneous model, but pseudo because this is not a truly homogeneous system. We know that there is a heterogeneous system, but our observation is that there are no mass and energy transport limitations, and therefore, we completely overlook this aspect of transport limitation and get a model which is similar to pseudo homogeneous model. So, these kind of multiphase models are often referred to as pseudo homogeneous models. But what if mass and energy transport limitations are really present in our system? Okay. So, let us consider that scenario. So, once again what we are saying is that we have this catalyst bed. Now, if I look at one of this catalyst particle, and let me start saying that first only external diffusion limitations are important. What we are looking for is QMJ, which is kilomole per meter cube of reactor volume per hour. So, what is the rate of this reaction? Now, if you recall our discussion on external mass transfer limitations, we said that there is a thin film which surrounds this. So, if this Cj is my bulk concentration, up to this point it is same as Cj, but then concentration decreases and concentration on the surface is Cjs, and the reaction rate must be equal to the mass transfer rate. So, what did we write for an individual single particle? We wrote that Kg into Cj minus Cjs must be the rate of reaction or rate of change of Jth species for this one particular catalyst. Now, this rate is per unit catalyst surface area. So, let us multiply this by the surface area of the catalyst. So, this one is kilomole per catalyst surface area per hour. So, let us multiply this by mp square, but at a given cross section we do not have only single particle, we have n number of particles, So, multiply this by number of particles per unit volume of the reactor. So, number per mR cube will give me my required QMJ. Indeed, this is my QMJ, that is, at this cross section the particle or the species J will see its generation, which is equivalent to the mass transfer rate times AP times N. We can write AP into N as AV, that is catalyst surface area per unit volume of the catalyst, and if we assume spherical particle, that AV works out to be 3 by R 1 minus epsilon B. Now, what is this QMJ or this mass transfer rate? This must be same as my reaction rate. That is what we say, that there is no accumulation on the surface of the catalyst. So, whatever is coming because of mass transfer is same as the reaction rate. So, Kg into AV into Cj minus Cjs must be equal to minus Rj into Cjs, Rj, which is a function of surface concentration and temperature. What about energy balance? We will do the same thing, that is, energy transported to the surface must be counterbalanced by the heat, the heat effect of the reaction, and therefore, we say that QH, just as mass transfer QMJ was given by this particular term, QH is given by HF, that is the heat transfer coefficient, times AV, that is the particle surface area per unit volume of the reactor, multiplied by T minus Ts, where T is the bulk temperature, Ts is the surface temperature, and what this must be equal to? This must be counterbalanced by the energy effects in the reactor. So, this in fact gives us our required quantities in our generalized mass and energy balance equation. This under the condition that only external diffusion limits the rate of reaction. But what if internal diffusion is also there? If internal diffusion is there, so let us go back. So, this is our bed. Let us say we are looking at some cross section, this particular particle over here, and now what we are saying is that this particle, let us say we do not have external diffusion, but only internal diffusion. So, let us say that Cj is my concentration over here, the concentration is going to decrease continuously. So, let us say Cj prime is the concentration inside. Same is the case with my temperature T and T prime. And what describes the diffusion and reaction in the catalyst pellet? This is my mass balance, same as what we saw earlier. Energy balance, again similar for single particle. The only difference is my QMJ now. So, now if we position yourself into this bed, all that bed will experience is that there is a diffusive flux of species J at the surface, because there is no reaction in the bulk liquid, the reaction is only inside. So, all that we will experience if we are in the bulk is that J is diffusing in the catalyst pellet. So, the mass transfer or rate of generation of J, QMJ, must be this diffusive flux at radius of the catalyst pellet R. This is what for a single particle multiplied once again by the number of particles per unit volume of the area. This is what will give us what is the rate at which species J is changing in the bulk. Now, we also know from these mass balances and respective boundary condition, we can write this whole thing as effectiveness factor, that is nothing but my observed rate, okay, now but per unit volume of the reactor, which we can write as effectiveness factor into the rate at the bulk conditions. That is what the beauty of this effectiveness factor is. Similarly, for QH, that is my energy balance when both internal mass and energy limitations are important. So, let me recap once again. What we are saying is that we are writing now an heterogeneous model for a multiphase reactor. Why heterogeneous? Because we acknowledge that solids are distinct phase in our reactor. So, we describe what is happening in the solid and then couple it to what is happening in the bed. So, this is my solid phase balances and this is my coupling between the catalyst particle and the bed of the reactor or the reactor. Why? This coupling is, where is it used? This is my reactor equations, and these two quantities couple these reactor equations with my bed equations, and that is why we initially chose to write QMJ and QH as the rate of generation of species J in the bulk and rate of generation of energy QH in the bulk. And then depending on how we visualize these processes are taking place, we define QMJ and QH differently. That is, if we say that there are no mass and energy transport limitations, then QMJ and QH are simply reaction rates and rate of heat generation due to reaction. If external diffusion is important, then QMJ is nothing but the rate of mass transfer from bulk to the surface of the catalyst, which is the same as rate of reaction at the surface conditions, and similarly for energy. If we assume that both energy and mass internal limitations are there, internal transport limitations are there, then we have to write separate balances for solid phase and couple them through this boundary conditions. I mentioned about beauty of effectiveness factor. Now, just assume that if we use these balances, okay, these balances, not the second part. So, that is where effectiveness factor is there. If we just use this, then for solving my reactor balance, I have to solve these solid balances, calculate this flux and plug it in. But what if I had a priori or independently calculated my effectiveness factor as a function of, let us say, diffusive characteristic, reaction rate constants, bulk conditions. If I had this knowledge a priori, I could have substituted it over here, and without solving this mass and energy balances, I would have simply got my coupling that I require to solve my reactor balance. And this is why this effectiveness factor approach is popular even though we have now fancy computers which can solve any kinds of equations for us, the elegance of this method still carries the day. So, this is where the effectiveness factor, which is almost 50 years old concept, is still applicable and useful in today's scenario also. So, this is as far as developing the general mass and energy balance equations for our reactors, both homogeneous and heterogeneous. We will talk about more of these reactor mass balances whenever we discuss specifically reactors such as fluidized bed reactors little later on. But before now, let us now look at different types of reactors and their behavior. One of the important reactor behavior is associated with non-isothermal reactors, that is reactors in which the temperature is not constant. If you recall my first lecture, I had mentioned that when we study our undergraduate material, we typically deal with isothermal reactors, but isothermal reactors are only ideal. The real reactors are invariably non-isothermal. Why is that? That is because reactions are either absorb or release large amount of energy, that is the heat of reaction, depending on whether the reaction is endothermic or exothermic. And secondly, reaction rates are sensitive to fluctuations in temperature more than the fluctuations in concentration. Recall, the concentration dependency can be linear or mildly linear, second order and so on, or Langmuir-Hunsell-Wood kind of kinetics. But the temperature dependency is exponential, and so small increase in temperature causes the change of rate of reaction to be several orders of magnitude. So, that is why non-isothermal reactors are invariable. Now, there are situations where, for example, for exothermic reactions, non-isothermal operation is a preferred mode of operation over isothermal reactor. The reason for this is that we have large amount of energy that is released by the reaction. Now, what do we do with this energy? We can use this energy to increase the temperature of the reacting fluid, so that you get high reaction rates. But when it comes to exothermic system, as we will see shortly, there is a dilemma, because if you raise the temperature of the reacting system to a very high value, your equilibrium conversion is adversely affected. So, if temperature is too high, equilibrium is bad. If temperature is too low, the kinetics is poor. Either way, it is a lose, it is no win situation. So, better to make use of heat of reaction and operate the reactor in a non-isothermal manner, so that we can make use of the energy that is liberated to do certain things. What are those certain things? We will see in the future lectures. The main another reason why we should worry about isothermal non-isothermal operation is because invariably as the reactor size increases, temperature control is difficult. You may be able to control the temperature of a small test tube or a small beaker just by putting it in a thermostat, but imagine doing that for a reactor which is hundreds of meter cube of volume. Very challenging task, and therefore, operations are preferred as non-isothermal, because control may not be possible. But more than that, even if you are trying to do an isothermal operation, the knowledge of non-isothermal behavior is extremely important to understand what if kind of scenarios. What if my cooling system completely fails? I am running an exothermic reaction in an isothermal manner in a reactor, but my cooling system fails. What will happen? Or my pump fails, what will happen? So, to understand what if kind of scenarios which eventually may lead to serious accidents or failures of the processes, we must know what is the behavior of the non isothermal reacting system. So, let us try to focus on the simple behavior or behavior of simple reacting systems, and let us try to look at how this reactor will behave. So, let us try to look at the non isothermal behavior, and before we do that, let us rewrite our mass and energy balances, only energy balances, mass balances we already know. So, let us say that for CSTR we wrote the energy balance as Nj Cpj dou T by dou T equal to summation Fj0 Hj0, that is enthalpy of stream coming in, plus V minus delta Hi summation Hi Ri into plus Q which is Ak into Tr minus T. So, this is my mass or rather energy balance for my stirred tank reactor, and for my plug flow reactor my energy balance is summation Cj Cpj into dou T by dou T accumulation term plus U convective transport plus equal to Q, where Q here is 4 by dt Tr minus U into Tr minus T. So, this is my stirred tank reactor equation, this is my plug flow reactor equation, and let us first try to understand what is meant by operating a reactor in an isothermal manner, when energy effects are important. So, when we want to operate the reactor in an isothermal manner, then temperature is constant. So, we can put these accumulation terms to be 0, these terms to be 0, and similarly the term that is the convective term also to be 0, and simply say that to maintain, let us say for a stirred tank reactor at stationary or at constant temperature or isothermal reactor, what is it that we require? So, according to this energy balance, minus Q must be, which is our AKU into T minus Tr, must be same as from this particular balance V into minus delta H into R, the rate of reaction, because we are assuming let us say a batch reactor, okay, isothermal reactor, so that we do not have temperature of the, or the let us say that we are looking at continuous system, but enthalpy in and out is same, that is temperature is of the inlet is same as the temperature of the outlet. So, we are maintaining that temperature. So, what does it take? So, for example, in a CSTR, this is what is required to maintain that temperature constant. Okay. What is it that is required in a batch reactor, let us say now. For a batch reactor, I am just going to assume my first order reaction. So, let us say that we have reaction A going to B. The rate of this reaction is K into Ca, where K is a function of time, and if we use we are going to use isothermal. So, we know my concentration changes from my initial concentration in an exponential manner. So, if I now take all this together, that is concentration decreasing exponentially with time, put it over here, put it back into this, I will get my heat of removal will be, I am just putting some numbers, it does not mean so much at this point, but all I am trying to do is say that V minus delta H Ca naught e raised to minus kT into K value. So, for a batch reactor, assuming that this is all constant, that is that 20 value I put and K value of arbitrary 0.5, it means that to operate a batch stirred tank reactor in an isothermal manner, I have to remove energy in an exponential manner. Why? Because the rate of reaction for a first order system, concentration changes decreases exponentially. So, rate will decrease exponentially. So, my energy removal also has to be exponential. All right. What if we are operating this reactor as a stirred tank reactor, continuous process? In a continuous process, V is constant, delta H is constant, rate is constant. So, it would mean that Q of T is a constant. That means, for a stirred tank reactor, I have to keep on removing the energy or supply the energy depending on whether it is a endothermic or exothermic reaction at a constant rate. For a batch process, it has to change exponentially with time. What happens in a plug flow reactor? The plug flow reactor also equation is same. So, what will happen for a plug flow reactor? For plug flow reactor, again I will say my Q, which is if we go back over there, that is now all these terms are 0. So, Q is this. So, if my Q, which is minus delta H into R once again K into Ca, but for a tubular reactor, Ca is Ca0 e raised to minus K Z by L, the length of the reactor, oh sorry, Z by U. Okay. Z by U, the velocity, it is actually K into residence time, or in other words, this now will be some number. I am going to just put some numbers, again numbers do not mean, but what it means is that if I want to maintain the temperature uniform through the entire reactor bed, I have to remove energy Q at a rate which changes along the length of the reactor. Why? Because for a tubular reactor, concentration decreases exponentially along the length of the reactor. So, the rate of reaction will decrease exponentially along the length of the reactor, and therefore, the rate of generation of energy will change exponentially along the length of the reactor, and therefore, the heat to be added or removed to maintain the temperature constant will have to also change along the length of the reactor. Not an easy thing to do. How do you achieve that? You will either have to change what? The reference temperature along the length of the reactor, not an easy task to do. You will have to do something so that the rate of heat added or removed is exponential. So, as I said, maintaining isothermal conditions, even though easier said on paper, is very difficult in practice, particularly for tubular reactor. How do you do that? Because you have to change your heating or cooling rate along the length of the reactor. Okay. Now, isothermal is one end of the spectrum. What if I want to do this reaction in an adiabatic manner? So, what is an adiabatic reactor? Adiabatic reactor is a one in which there is no heat added or removed from the system. So, isothermal operation and the other extreme is adiabatic reactor. Isothermal operation, I am going to maintain the temperature constant. Whether it is possible or not is a different story, but that is my aim. What is a adiabatic reactor? Adiabatic reactor is a one where you do not have heat added or heat removed from the system. Now, where do we come across this such situations? One case where adiabatic reactor may actually be operating is when there is no coolant or no cooling or heating system is present. Okay. No cooling or heating system is present. Okay. Now, if you just to keep our Q is AKU into TR minus T. So, if there is no TR or the heat transfer coefficient of the material is very poor, Q is likely to be 0. So, that is one such scenario. Now, another scenario is what happens when volume is large. Okay. Now, going back to our isothermal operation, we said that AKU into TR minus T is V into minus delta H into R. I am talking about a stirred tank reactor, similar thing can be said about other reactor. So, let us say that this is my reactor, this is my volume and this is what I am using to cool it. Okay. So, AK is the area of this. Now, I increase my volume. I increase my volume, what happens in my reactor system? My generation rate over here is proportional to volume raised to power 1. But what about AK? My heat removal rate. My heat removal rate, if the reactor is cylindrical or tubular in nature, it will be V by half, if it is spherical 2/3 and so on. Why? Because your area will be proportional to either R square or R cube, depending on whether you have which kind of reactor. So, what we will have is that as our size increases, our heat generation will increase V raised to 1, but our heat removal rate will only increase as either square root or 2/3 of V and so on. So, what will happen? As we go on increasing the reactor sizes, our cooling rate will be far lower compared to our heat generation rate, leading to a situation where heat removal is practically negligible compared to heat generation. Another scenario of where adiabatic operation becomes important. And the third case, as I had said earlier, is the what if kind of scenario. What if I want to check whether my reactor isothermal operation fails. Isothermal operation fail means there is no heat removal or addition to the system. What will happen to my reactor? So, that is another aspect where my adiabatic operation will be important. So, we will stop for this session, and in the next session we will look at how does the adiabatic operations actually, what happens when you have a adiabatic operation, and how do we relate the temperature concentration changes and so on. So, in today's session what we essentially saw was how do we develop mass and energy balances for heterogeneous reactors, in particular for fixed bed reactors, which are one of the most dominant kind of reactors used in the industry. We also saw the importance of non-isothermal operation, and how do we try to we started actually the discussion on design of non-isothermal reactor systems. The details will be in the sessions to follow. Thank you.